Good day to you, Year 9. Welcome back. This is week 6 and this is lesson number 3. So we have looked this week at the structure of the heart and problems that you can get with the heart. Yesterday you will have seen Miss Corbett doing her heart dissection. I hope you enjoyed that. And today we are going to be still on the topic of the heart and looking at ways in which we can treat the heart. What I would like you to do, it's a bit of a complicated one in terms of what you need to do for it. It's not so hard in terms of how much thinking you're going to have to do. We're going to have a little bit of an unscrambling of words and then using it to crack a code. So you'll see that there are some jumbled up words. So the first thing you need to do is work out what the words actually are, and then you'll notice that you can, for the spaces that you put those letters, there is a number. So if you have got a letter for number 7, then if you go to the bottom, wherever there's a number 7, you can put that letter. Okay, and it works out a little code. So don't spend your entire hour on this. Do call it if it's taking too long, but have a go, see if you're able to crack it by unscrambling the words and then using the letters with the numbers to work out the code at the bottom. So pause the video now and have a go at that. Okay, so very well done all of you brave people that have attempted that. Let's see how we did. So the first word was atrium, then vein, then ventricle, then capillary, then septum, then aorta, and then artery. And if you use those letters and numbers, bottom, you get the fun fact for all the day. A heart can carry on beating outside of the human body. So if a heart is removed from the body, it will continue to beat for a period of time. Okay, back to it. So what do we need to take away from today in helping the heart? We need to be able to say how the heartbeat is maintained. We also need to know about artificial pacemakers and artificial hearts, how they're used by people. For 5 to 6s, we need to be able to explain why an irregular heartbeat is bad for you, why it's detrimental to your health, and problems or advantages and disadvantages associated with heart transplants. For 7 to 8, we need to explain how a natural pacemaker maintains a regular heartbeat, and also looking at how artificial pacemakers correct an irregular heartbeat. So let's get going. Now here is a picture of a beating heart. Unfortunately they cut off all the blood vessels for the dissection, so you wouldn't have seen the blood vessels like you can on here in Miss Corbett's dissection, but this one is a lot better looking at those different blood vessels. So I want you to think to yourself, what do you think keeps the heart beating in its natural rhythm? Okay, so what is it? How does that heart keep beating at regular intervals? If you want to pause the video, you can do that now. Have a think, see if you're right in a minute. Okay, so hopefully you've had a thought about that. That's what we're going to be looking at today, so don't worry too much if you didn't know the answer for it, but it's actually something called a natural pacemaker. Now, probably every time that you will have come across the word pacemaker, you're probably thinking of an operation and something being put into the heart to get it going. But actually, we all have a pacemaker, and we often refer to them as a natural pacemaker. So they're the pacemaker that we're born with and that keep going, hopefully, throughout our lives. Now, it keeps a regular, healthy rhythm of about 70 beats per minute. But different people will have different heart rates depending on fitness levels, things like that. So most people on average is about 70 beats per minute at rest. And it's controlled by the natural pacemaker. So from this slide, you will need a sentence just saying what a natural pacemaker is. It's what controls, keeps a healthy heart rhythm. Okay, now you do not need to write this bit, but it's just kind of going into a bit more detail of how it works. So if you look at the diagram, you'll see that there are some yellow lines. Those are showing nerve fibers. Okay, so they are bundled together with loads and loads of neurons. It makes a nerve. And you have got kind of two main parts where these nerves are found. You've got the sinus node or the SA node, and that's the bit towards the top on the left-hand side. And it's a cluster of cells that are connected to those nerves, and it's what generates the electrical impulses. Now, the electrical signal generated by the SA node then moves until it reaches the AV node, or the atrioventricular node. So it's starting off at the top, where that electrical impulse is generated, and it's moving down towards the bottom. Now, once it's past the AV node, it will then travel to the ventricles along special fibers that you'll find inside the wall. So it's generated in the SA node, travels along to the AV node, and then goes through the ventricle walls. And as that's happening, as those electrical impulses are going past, it's causing that cardiac muscle, that muscle in the heart, to contract. So that's why at the beginning of a heartbeat, you've got the atrium contracting first, because that's where the electrical signal first appears, and then the ventricles afterwards. That's what creates, as I said in the last lesson, or lesson 1 of this week, creates that lub-dub sound. Okay, obviously you're not going to be able to think, pair, share this, but have a think to yourself, and again you might want to pause the video after I've asked the question. If the natural pacemaker stops working, what problems do you think this could cause? Now, it's not necessarily talking about it not working at all, but there might just be a little bit of a fault in there. What problems do you think it's going to cause? So have a think about that. Okay, so there's kind of two main problems that occur. It causes your heart to go too fast, or it causes your heart to go too slow. So if the heart beats too slowly, it means there's not enough oxygen and glucose getting to all your cells for respiration. And if it goes too fast, then the blood isn't being pumped efficiently. So because it's going so fast, not much of it actually passes through, so it's just not going to be as efficient. So if there are problems with the natural pacemaker, we can get something called an artificial pacemaker. And it's a small electrical device that is put inside the chest or the abdomen, and it basically sort of counteracts the natural pacemaker, which is going too fast or too slow, and it causes it to go at a regular rhythm. Okay. Now, as I say, it's a small device, about the size of a matchbox, not very big. It's about 20 to 50 grams. And the main part of it is a pulse generator. So that creates that electrical pulse. Now, that's got a battery in it. You see a very small battery. and a computer circuit. And it's got one or a couple of wires coming out of it, which then connect to the heart. So this is what it looks like before it's inserted into a person. So can you pop down just a very brief, a sentence, 2 sentences tops, about what an artificial pacemaker is? So pause the video now. Okay, so that's what a artificial pacemaker is. And what it does is it will then create or generate the electrical impulse to start off that signaling of the heart contracting. Now, almost all of the pacemakers, especially the new ones that are put in, or the ones that have been put in more recently, can actually be adjusted. So you can actually adjust that rhythm depending on what the body is going through. If the pacemaker senses that your heart has missed a beat or is beating too slowly, it will send signals to steady the heart. So if for no reason your heart starts beating really, really quickly, then the artificial pacemaker will just send out those electrical impulses to give it that regular beating. Now, if your heart isn't beating irregularly, then nothing happens. It's only happening when the sensor senses that the heart is beating irregularly. Okay, so that is how artificial pacemakers work. A very, very common procedure is to have a artificial pacemaker inserted via an operation, and they're very, very useful because say they will correct any irregular heartbeats, whether they are going too fast or too slow. They will allow your heart to beat naturally. It only kind of steps in when there is a problem, and it just makes sure that your heart is pumping efficiently. So we're going to put this together. We've got a question. It says, describe what a natural pacemaker is and explain how a 41 can be corrected. It's going to be worth 6 marks. So can you now answer that question with the command word to describe? So you just need to talk about it. And then you have explain how a 41 is corrected, so you need to say how it's correcting it. So can you have a go at answering that 6 marker? What's the video now? Okay, so hopefully you've had a go at that. I'll show you that with a different colour pen. And I'm going to read through this. As I normally say, yours is not going to look exactly like this, but it's about picking up where you can get marks from in an exam question. So you said that the natural pacemaker is just a group of cells in the right atrium, or the right-hand side, top right of the heart, and that would be worth a mark. And if you said that produces an electrical signal, or a regular electrical signal, that's going to be worth a mark. If you say it doesn't work properly, then you can have an artificial pacemaker fitted, so that will be worth a mark. If you said that that is put into the chest, or operation puts it in, and it corrects the heart, then that's going to be worth a mark. If the heart is beating normally, it doesn't do anything. But if the heart beats irregularly, then it will be activated or stop doing it. And it can detect if you are exercising or if you have got other high demands for the heart rate. So give yourself a mark at 6. Hopefully we've got some points in there. Hopefully we've got 6 marks on that. And now we're going to move on. So that was artificial pacemakers. We're now going to look at artificial Okay, now this video tip that will go with this slide. So you can go on to Show My Homework and you can access that. I'll put it on as the link for this video. You have a link on there on this actual video. And it's really interesting because it shows how artificial hearts work now, the more modern artificial hearts, which is very interesting. Okay, so artificial hearts, as the name suggests, they're just going to be ones that are natural, tend to be man-made, and replace what is not working. And you'll have this if you have severe heart failure. Again, your heart is not able to pump enough blood around the body, which means that you're going to start having organ failures, obviously parts of the body shutting down, and things like that. So it's kind of very, very serious. You need to get a heart in there straight away, and if there's no heart available for a transplant. Now, an artificial heart is a plastic device. Now, because it's made of plastic, it means that it's not going to break down as much as like you have some metals that would react with the blood, things like that. So it's made of plastic, and it's basically there to replace the ventricles. So those two chambers at the bottom. Now, there's a few reasons, a few causes, I suppose, for heart failure. So you can have heart disease, so that's when the muscle of the heart is diseased and isn't working, starting to die off the cells. If you've got coronary heart disease, and we spoke about that in lesson 1, so that's when there is blockages in the coronary artery that supply the heart. This is what will tend to lead to major heart attacks and things like that. Sometimes you can have a really severe viral infection, and that can cause the heart to start shutting down, those cells dying, so it's not able to pump anymore. And then there are some other less common diseases that can have an effect on the heart. So what I'd like you to do is put a sentence down just about what an artificial heart is, and then I'd like you to come off this video and click on the link or show my homework so you can have a look at one in action. So can you do that now, please? You're able to see how the artificial heart works. And both a newspaper article, you can find this online if you just Google plastic heart artificial heart, Matthew Green, and it's basically a story about a father who had this artificial heart. He was 40 years old, he had a complete artificial heart put in, and he had that in his, or carried around in a backpack, and that enabled him to stay alive for 2 years until there was a heart available for a transplant. So if he didn't have that technology available, he wouldn't have survived. Fortunately, because the artificial heart was available, he was able to do that for the time it took to find an actual heart transplant. Okay, so a quick recap. We have looked so far at the use of artificial pacemakers at keeping the heart rate regular. We have looked at artificial hearts, which can actually replace the job of the ventricles of the heart. And we're now going to look at one more medical procedure, which is the valves. So we should know by now what the function of the valves is. That is to stop the backflow of blood, to make sure it's not going the wrong way. And sometimes these can be damaged. Quite often people are born with damaged valves. Sometimes they can damage or get damaged as you get older. And then if you have that damage to your valve, then the blood isn't going around very efficiently. You're not getting enough oxygen and glucose to all of your cells. Now, there's two different options that you can have for replacing these heart valves, and they are mechanical and biological. Now, mechanical is going to be a built one. So one that's been built by humans to replace the job of the valve. A biological one, remember bio means living. So it is coming from another living thing, and it is replacing that valve. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the two different ways in which we can replace heart valves using biological or mechanical. And I'd like you to just create a table of advantages and disadvantages for both of them. So advantages and disadvantages for the mechanical valve, advantages and disadvantages for the biological valve. And try and think or try and point out economic, personal and social factors in those advantages and disadvantages. So if you pause now, create two tables, advantages, disadvantages, one for mechanical valves, one for biological valves. Okay, so we're going to start with mechanical valves. Now you don't need to obviously write all of this, you just need to pick out whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage, and you need to put it into your table in the correct place. So mechanical heart valves are very lightweight, they're very strong, and they're very durable. Now, they're very strong and durable because they are made of metals such as titanium. Now, durable means that it can kind of be bashed about but still be okay, can kind of go under those rough conditions that will be in the heart. And they tend to last, because they're made of titanium, they tend to last about 20 to 30 years. So if you have a mechanical heart valve, it will see you through about 20 to 30 years until you need to have it replaced again. Now, because the materials in the valve, it does cause blood clots. So it is quite likely that blood clots will form on the material because of the material that they're having to use. Now, if you get blood clots on the material, on the mechanical heart valve, then obviously that's going to limit its ability to work. So it can actually stop it from working full stop. Now, because of this issue that they've identified, it means that if you do have a mechanical heart valve, you have to have blood thinning drugs every day for the rest of your life. Now, quite a lot of people do take blood thinning drugs. It's one of the treatments for coronary heart diseases, things like that. So people do take that, and it doesn't have a big effect on their life, but it's something that they're going to have to do for the rest of their lives. Now, if a blood clot forms and it kind of breaks off the heart valve, the mechanical heart valve, then it can go into a blood vessel. Now, the problem with that is that if you have a blood clot in your brain, for instance, that can cause stroke. And then if you have a blood clot, as we know in our coronary arteries, then that can cause heart attacks. So quite a few pros and cons for mechanical heart valves. So I'd like you to pause the video now and complete your table. Okay, so we're going to move on to biological heart valves. Now, biological valves are created from animal valves or other animal tissue. It's strong and flexible, and we tend to get it from pigs. And the reason why we use pigs is because they have very, very similar structures, very similar tissues to us. So their skin and the layers of tissue underneath the skin, for instance, is very, very similar to humans. Now, with the biological ones, they last about 10 to 20 years. So in the last one we're looking at, it was 20 to 30 years. These are only 10 to 20. Now, there's much less of a risk of blood clotting, which is really good, which means the patients don't need to take blood thinning medication for the rest of their lives. Even though you probably think it would be cheaper, biological heart valves are actually more expensive, where you have to extract them, adapt them before they go in. But that's not taking into account the taking of blood thinning pills for the rest of their life. So the actual valve themselves, the mechanical ones are a lot cheaper, but because you have to take drugs for the rest of your life, it kind of evens it out. So can you pause the video now, and can you put in advantages and disadvantages of biological heart valves? This might actually change some of your mechanical heart valve ones. If you thought that a valve lasting 20 to 30 years, for instance, was a disadvantage, actually that is an advantage because it lasts longer than these biological ones. Excuse that drain sound in the background. We're in Miss Nixon's room. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go through 6 patients, and you're going to decide which treatment will be best for them. Is it going to be an artificial heart? Is it going to be a artificial pacemaker? Do you think it's going to be a biological heart valve replacement or a mechanical heart valve replacement? Now, some of them will lend themselves to a couple of answers. So what is important is that you're saying why you've chosen that treatment. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each one of these. There is a slide for each one. And you're going to put the name of the patient, and you're going to say what the best treatment will be for them, and why, the most important bit, why you have chosen that. Okay, so we're going to start with Ali, who's a 43-year-old office worker from Birmingham, got married to Becky last year, and they're expecting their first child. Now, Ali is very ill, and his heart is badly diseased after contracting an infection. A donor has been found with the same tissue type. So if Ali arrived at your hospital in this condition with this problem, what would you suggest would be the best treatment and why? Can you pause the video and write your answer? Okay, next one. We've got Fergus. He's 36, he's from Essex, he works on a building site and he plays rugby. Now, Fergus has a defect with his bicuspid valves of his heart. So his valve is not working. Now, Fergus is a Jehovah's Witness, and they've got very strong religious views that mean that they can't have transplants. Now, what would you suggest would be the best treatment for Fergus? Okay, next. So we've got Patrick. He's 76 from Chester. He's a retired civil servant, so he worked for the government, who enjoys playing golf. And Patrick is in good health and has a healthy heart, but his heartbeat is irregular. So what would you suggest would be the best treatment for Patrick and why? Right, next up we've got Cheryl, and Cheryl is 39, she's from Cardiff, she's a nurse and has 3 children. Cheryl passed out last week whilst crossing the road. Her heart is healthy, but her heart beats at a much higher rate than is normal. So what would you suggest is the best treatment for Cheryl and why? Right, next we've got Shana, who is a 7-year-old from Liverpool, has an older brother, and one day wants to learn ballet. Shana, though, was born with a heart defect and needs a transplant, but a donor has not been found yet. So what would you think would be the best treatment and why? Okay, and the last one we're going to look at is Carol. Carol's 69 years old and from Leeds. She's a retired teacher who enjoys travelling and often visits her children in Australia. Carol has had major heart surgery. Her heart should recover, but it will be a few months until this happens. What would you suggest is the best treatment? Okay. Now, as I said before, there isn't a specific right or wrong answer for this. I'm going to go over the answers or the things that I was thinking of as we went through these, see whether you got something similar. So Ali, who was very ill and his heart was badly diseased after contracting an infection, a donor has been found with the same tissue type. You might have just said a heart transplant. If they've got a donor and they've got the tissue, then just go straight in with the heart transplant. It doesn't require anything else. Next one was Fergus, who was from Essex, working on a building site, and he had a problem with his valves. And I would suggest the mechanical valve, because it's not a living transplant, so it's not having tissue put in. Next one was Patrick, the 76-year-old, healthy heart, but it's beating irregularly. I would go an artificial pacemaker. Cheryl passed out because her heart beats at a higher rate than normal. Again, an artificial pacemaker. Shauna, who's got the heart defect, needs a transplant, but there hasn't been a donor. That's probably going to be an artificial heart, because that will keep her going, functioning, until she's able to find a donor to have a heart transplant. And the last one was Carol. She's had major heart surgery. Her heart should recover, but it'll be a few months until this happens. No treatment. Okay. Just got to wait and see for Carol. Okay, so that is the end of Helping the Heart. Hopefully we are able to now say how a natural pacemaker works. So about the formation of that electrical signal in the right atrium, and then that travelling down to the ventricles, and that's what causes those contractions. Hopefully you've said how we can treat irregular heartbeats, so that's using that artificial pacemaker. And hopefully we can evaluate different ways in which we can treat heart problems, such as the artificial valves, be it mechanical or biological, and also the artificial heart. So that's it from me. Very well done. There were some tricky parts to this lesson, so well done if you were able to follow. And you'll hear from me tomorrow. Have a lovely day, guys. And take care of yourself. Bye-bye.